of Aaron's journey, and it was not a straight path from shadow into light, but a winding trail with as many steps back as there were forward. Days began to fold into weeks, each one a new and unpredictable battlefield for his will. There were mornings he conquered. He would wake in the deep, pre-dawn blue, his mind clear, his body answering the call before the excuses could even form. On those runs, with the river mist cooling his skin, he felt invincible. But those days were matched and sometimes outnumbered by the others. The mornings where the old habit was a leaden blanket, pinning him to the mattress. On those days he would wake late, the sun already high, a familiar sour taste of regret in his mouth. And on those defeated days, the small piece of wood sat on his desk, utterly, glaringly blank. It no longer felt like a promise or a tool, it felt like a silent judge. He would catch its shape from the corner of his eye, and it seemed to mock the fragility of his resolve. Frustration would curdle inside him. He'd snatch it up, his fingers tightening around the smooth grain until his knuckles turned white. The thought would scream in his mind, a voice of pure defiance, "What is the point? This is childish. One stupid mark on a piece of wood doesn't build a future. It doesn't make me a different person. It's just a line." The urge to simply open his window and hurl it into the river, to be free of its constant, quiet judgment, was a physical ache in his chest. But then, on one of those evenings, heavy with self-reproach, he found himself drawn back to the old wooden bridge. He leaned heavily on the railing, staring down at the dark, flowing water, seeing only his own failure reflected back. And as if carried on the current itself, his grandfather's voice returned to him, not as a memory but as a living, steady presence. "Even the river doesn't look powerful in a day. But give it time, and it carves through stone." He looked closer. He saw the rocks in the riverbed not as obstacles but as testaments. They were smooth, worn, shaped not by a single cataclysmic flood, but by countless gentle, insistent touches of water over years, decades, centuries. The truth of it washed over him not as a concept but as a feeling. He had been waiting for a single dramatic wave to change his life, but the river taught a different, humbler, and far more powerful lesson. And so Aaron continued. He let go of the need for grand, sweeping gestures. Instead, he focused on the next right thing. He carved a line not for a perfect day, but for studying an extra hour when his mind was a fog and begged him to stop. He carved a line for helping his mother at the shop without being asked, finding a strange peace in the simple, tangible work. He carved a line for finally cleaning the chaotic landscape of his desk, and for the greatest victory of all, simply showing up when every fiber of his being did not want to. The lines began to multiply, a growing forest of tiny victories on a small field of wood. And with each one, a profound realization began to dawn on him, quiet but undeniable. It wasn't the individual task, the run, the chore, the study session, that was changing him. It was the consistency. The simple, repeated, often difficult act of choosing to try again and again. It was the sound of the blade scraping over and over, writing a new story not in ink but in action. And then life, in its cruel and unpredictable flow, brought the journey to a sudden, shuddering halt. There came a morning unlike any other, a morning where the river's hum was drowned out by a deeper, more profound silence. The morning his grandfather didn't wake up. The town gathered, their voices hushed, a community wrapped in the soft, heavy blanket of grief. But for Aaron, the loss was a void, a silence he had never known, echoing in the spaces where his grandfather's voice used to be. In the days that followed, the world lost its color. The small piece of wood, once a source of quiet struggle and pride, now sat on his desk, untouched. It became a monument not to progress but to absence. He would pass by it, and his heart would ache with a fresh wave of sorrow. It was a painful echo of his old self, a dream deferred, a promise unkept. Just as his dreams had once gathered dust at the back of his notebook, now this token of his grandfather's belief sat in frozen stillness, a silent testament to a lesson interrupted by the ultimate goodbye. But the river, as it always had, continued its journey. And one evening, drawn by a force he didn't understand, Aaron found himself walking back to the old wooden bridge. The planks creaked the same familiar song under his feet. He stood at the railing, watching the water flow endlessly toward an unseen horizon. The grief was a physical weight in his chest. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the piece of wood. His fingers trembled as he rubbed his thumb over the collection of lines, each one a memory, a struggle, a small victory his grandfather had witnessed. He looked up at the stars beginning to pepper the twilight sky, his vision blurring. "You didn't wait either, Grandpa," he whispered, his voice cracking, the words carried away by the breeze. "So I won't." In that moment, grief did not shatter him. It forged him. It clarified a truth as hard and real as the wood in his hand. Time is the most precious currency, and it is spent whether we choose to move with it or not. With a steady hand now, he took his knife. The sound of the blade, that familiar gritty scratch, was different this time. It was not a sound of hope or of discipline, but of love. It was a promise carved not in ambition, but in legacy. That single line, born not from a desire to change, but from a determination to honor, became the most meaningful one of all. Months rolled by, each one a steady, flowing current, carrying Aaron forward. The small piece of wood was now a landscape of his will, almost full. The lines were no longer just marks, they were a chronicle. Some were deep and confident, carved in moments of clarity. Others were shallow and hesitant, etched in doubt. But together they told a story, not of a sudden miracle, but of a slow, stubborn becoming. And Aaron had changed. The river of time had worn away the sharp edges of his procrastination, not into something perfect, but into something strong and reliable. He was no longer waiting for a different version of himself to arrive. He had become someone present. He learned that inspiration isn't a lightning strike you wait for in the rain. It's a small, steady fire you build yourself, one act of courage, one scrap of kindling at a time. He didn't wait for motivation to find him. He created it with every choice, every carved line. Soon the people in his town began to notice. The shift was subtle at first, then undeniable. The same boy who once sat on the bridge for hours, staring at the water as if searching for a lost part of himself, was now the one standing firmly upon it, helping others find their way across their own struggles. He saw the confusion in a younger child's eyes and remembered his own. He began teaching them how to study, not just the subjects, but the discipline of sitting down to begin. He saw litter by the riverbank and remembered his own cluttered desk. He organized small community cleanups, turning apathy into shared purpose. He had learned the language of small beginnings, and he was now teaching it to anyone who would listen. In his grandfather's old workshop, surrounded by the scent of pine and memory, he started a new project. He began carving simple, beautiful wooden bracelets, and on each one he would etch a single, small mark. When people asked what it meant, he would tell them it symbolized one day of effort, the first honest step, the choice to begin. He called them bridge lines. They were more than jewelry, they were tiny talismans of persistence, a physical reminder that every great journey, every crossed chasm, begins with a single, courageous step. And sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, he would walk back to the center of that old bridge. He'd hold his own worn token, now nearly covered in the story of his transformation, and he would listen. He could almost hear the echo of his own whispered doubts from a lifetime ago, now answered not by the river, but by the man he had chosen to become. Years later, Aaron found himself standing on that same old wooden bridge. The wood beneath his feet was more worn, the river's song just as constant. He looked down at the water, the very same water that had witnessed his whispers, his struggles, his grief. And in that profound, peaceful moment, a lifetime of lessons converged, and he finally understood. The bridge he had been waiting his entire life to cross. It was never this physical structure of wood and stone. It wasn't a destination on the other side. The real bridge was the one he had been building all along without even realizing it. It was a bridge woven from effort, forged in the fire of daily choices. It was built beam by beam from tiny invisible victories that no one else would ever see. The victories fought and won in the quiet of a waking mind, in the choice to try just one more time. And maybe you are standing on your own bridge right now, looking at the water flowing fast below, feeling the distance to the other side, waiting for the right time to finally step forward, waiting for the right mood, the right sign, the perfect, guaranteed chance. But Aaron learned the river's deepest secret, and he passes it now to you. The bridge you're waiting for is already inside you. You don't find it, you build it. You build it with one step when the path is unclear. You build it with one mark when the effort feels small. You build it with one small, quiet act of courage, repeated every single day. So start where you are, not where you think you should be. Use what you have, not what you wish you had. Do what you can, not everything all at once. Just begin. And one day you'll pause, you'll look back at the distance you've traveled, at the person you've become, and you'll realize with a heart full of quiet strength that you have already crossed the river.